Hello and welcome to another edition of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
And Todd was gracious enough to let me pick the movie this week, and I chose Night of the Comet from 1984. This movie just kind of popped into my head. I have only seen it once, but I remembered it fondly. I kind of remembered it being kind of cute and quirky and fun, and I thought it would be something that we would have fun talking about, so that's why I picked it. Todd, do you have any history with this movie at all?
This is just a movie that I saw on the shelves and always was interested in, kind of, but when I looked at the cover and read about it, I think just back then I thought, maybe it looks kind of, I don't know. There was nothing about it that really appealed to me enough to make me pull it down and watch it. But I've always been curious about it, so I'm really glad you suggested it.
Well, good.
That's a real roaring, level of enthusiasm there, right?
Yeah, right.
Well,
I mean, it's not. I wouldn't say by any stretch of the imagination it's a good movie. Well. No, I would say it's a good movie. I wouldn't say by any stretch of the imagination it's a great movie, but it's kind of different. You know, it's when it all boils down to it, it's kind of a zombie movie, but it's got a little bit of a different take, I guess, on your typical zombie movie. And I guess kind of what I liked about it is that the protagonists are a little bit non-conventional. The movie is about these two girls, Regina and Sam, who are sisters. They're just kind of these typical Valley Girl sisters who live in LA, and, are going about their business. Regina, they call her Reg or Reggie a lot. She's played by Catherine Mary Stewart, who's really pretty and has a really recognizable face. When I was looking at her IMDb page, I think the thing that I remembered her most from was Weekend at Bernie's. I think she was like one of the romantic interests in that movie. But
for me, it was The Last Starfighter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she's totally in that too. And Sam is played by Kelly Maroney, who was one of the girls from Chopping Mall.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a favorite of ours.
Everything leads back to that, baby.
Everything leads back to Chopping Mall. It's kind of a simple premise, but an interesting one in that, they're both just kind of going about their things. The movie opens up with these news reports about how this comet is going to be going by Earth, I guess, and it's the first time that a comet is going to be passing this close since the dinosaurs were around, which maybe should have given these people some warning that maybe this isn't an entirely good thing. But there's all this excitement about this big comet, and everybody's throwing these parties and celebrating and waiting for this comet to go by, and eventually when it does go by, it wipes everybody out.
That's pretty much it. That's how the movie opens. I would say this movie is, I don't know, I guess it's a horror movie in the same sense that I Am Legend is a horror movie. I thought of I Am Legend, Omega Man. It's one of these post-apocalyptic kind of films where some big event happens and humanity is partially wiped out, but a few people survive, and this is the story of those people who survive. But this was an interesting event in that the comet, just, I guess, being outside and looking at it, caused everybody to turn to red dust.
Yeah.
like it's not like it crashed into Earth, I don't think it was, but it was like, as long as you weren't outside looking at it, like supposedly most of the world was, because it was the must-see event of the summer, then you would survive. But you don't necessarily, you're not going to last long because you get infected somehow. It's really vague, quite honestly. But like Omega Man or I Am Legend, like the survivors get infected somehow with a virus of some kind that turns them slowly into zombies.
Well, that's what it's a little bit confusing to me, frankly, because that's the premise, is that supposedly if you were one of the people who survived, you're infected with this thing and you're going to start to deteriorate, except that doesn't hold true for everybody.
Exactly. It's all really weird. And zombie is maybe the wrong word, because it's not like they die and come back to life. It's like they slowly transform into a monster physically, and then I guess the problem is we don't see a lot of examples of this in this movie. I mean, it's kind of, to call it a horror movie, I don't know. Is it accurate? Can you really call this it's billed as a horror movie, but there isn't, for my sense, a lot of what we would consider horror in it. There aren't many of these creatures out there. The ones that we see clearly, half of them are in dreams, and then mostly it's a comedy in a way, and I guess adventure or thriller type story, like survival story. Mm-hmm. I think part of my reaction to this movie, and I actually watched it twice, because the first time through it, I have to admit I wasn't really taken by it, and I thought, all right, this is a cult classic film. There's a lot of people like this. I must be watching this wrong. So I went back in the morning and I watched it again, and I enjoyed it a lot better the second time through. And I think part of my reason for that is my expectations for the movie changed. I realized it wasn't going to be a horror movie in the sense that I was looking for. And once I realized that, I think I was able to enjoy it better and look at the other ways that the movie spoke to me, if that makes any sense, because it wasn't scary.
No, it's not scary at all. And, talking about the zombies or whatever, I mean, they're not traditional zombies. It's because, like, they can talk, and, like, it just seems like they just kind of turn into bad people, like mean, violent people, and then they die, I guess.
I guess, like, in an indeterminate amount of time for indeterminate reasons. But it's kind of like Charlton Heston, Omega Man, that one. These, where they were vampires. They were like humans, except they were also vampires, so that made them bad, and that made them scary looking, and they wanted to kill people.
Well, I think what makes the movie appealing to me, and like I said, I saw it, and it's been 15 years since I saw it, and I just saw it that one time, and I just happened to pick it up off the shelves. I've mentioned this a million times when I was doing my internship for my career. I lived in a little tiny apartment away from my hometown, and I was just living off the very basics, and I didn't have cable or anything, and my mom bought me like a $300 gift card to the local video store, the rental place, and so I was renting movies every night, and I went through their whole horror section, and this is just one of the ones that I happened to pick up. And I think that maybe the reason that it's so appealing to me is that it is so 80s.
Oh, yes.
Like,
up one side and down the other.
Yes. I mean, it is quintessentially 80s, and with the music, and there's great music. Music throughout. Fantastic 80s music, and the characters are so 80s, and the fashion is so 80s.
The fashion, and even the I mean, it opens up with the main character. What was her name? Reggie playing Tempest. She's like the worst employee ever. She's like an employee of a theater, and the owner is behind the bar of the theater, alternately trying to sell people on Comet merchandise so they can run outside and view the comet, and trying to get her to do her freaking job of going up and down the theater and like shining a flashlight around, I guess. You've got to call her like 20 times away from this arcade game.
You're not. Hey, Regina, give that thing a rest, will you?
In a minute, Mel.
Look, I don't pay you to do that kind of stuff around here. Regina, I want you to clean everything up so we can get out of here in time to watch the comet.
Everything's cleaned up. Damn!
I want you to take this flashlight and walk the house.
Aw, Mel, they throw things at me.
Who cares? Walk the house.
Have you ever been hit with dots, Mel? Milk duds? Those things hurt.
Oh, how are you, sir? The refreshments are right over there.
And all she's interested in is boning her boyfriend in the projection room.
That's right.
I mean, it's really silly, but it's really funny, and it is billed as a horror movie, but it's also billed as a comedy. And I'm one of those people. I know that there are other people out there who it's like people who don't like their food to touch, like like they don't want their comedy bleeding over into their horror and vice versa. And I am not one of those people.
No.
I think that comedy and horror go hand in hand, and I love a good horror comedy, and I think that this is a pretty good horror comedy. It was written and directed by a guy named Tom Eberhardt, who hasn't done a whole lot. I mean, he's got a list of credits on IMDb. He's done some things, not a lot of things that I really recognize. I don't remember exactly how it was that he got interested in this concept, but when he got interested in this concept, he started just talking to teenage girls, which sounds really creepy, but let's pretend it's not. Like, he was working, I guess, in TV or something, and he happened to be around all of these young women in the 1980s, and he just started asking them, what would you do if there were some kind of apocalyptic event and you were the last person on Earth? And the responses that he got were less about shock and horror and, fears about being alone. And it was more about, that it would be exciting, it would be an exciting time, and you could do whatever you wanted, and you could go to the mall and get whatever you wanted and not have to pay for it.
Whatever clothes you want. And, but what about the boys? Like... It was
that was their only concern. It was like and he had to bring it up, like dating, and they're like, oh yeah, that might be a challenge.
I think it was viewing the movie through this lens, especially the second time around, that warmed me up to it, because the first time around I'm like, give me a break. I thought these girls seem very nonplussed about the fact that all of their friends and family and everything have just been wiped out, because their primary concerns seem to be about cheering each other up, complimenting each other's hair, jealousy over this one of the few guys left on the planet. I'm just thinking, is this serious? And then when I realized after a while, and especially the second time through, okay, this is kind of the point of the movie. It's a kind of satire, in a sense, then I really enjoyed it for being relatively pretty clever in that regard. So
yeah, I mean, it's a little silly, but it's kind of fun. And you've got these. I'll continue to call them Valley Girls, because that's kind of how they're described in the movie's description. But they're not entirely flat characters. In fact, I found both of the main characters to be very likable.
Yeah.
Like they're kind of charming and endearing. And Reggie is kind of the tougher one. She's the brunette, and she's kind of the more street smart, savvy one. Sam is her little sister, and though they don't look like sisters at all, they have completely not at all. They have completely different looks, but she's kind of the younger, a little bit more naive one. But they have good chemistry together.
They do.
If you don't believe them as sisters, you can at least believe them as friends, and they're cute. And I read that the director, he was inspired by these actual teenagers that he met, and then I also read that Joss Whedon was inspired by this movie to create the character of Buffy Summers, who is one of my absolute favorite characters in fiction, horror, whatever you want to call it. This girl who is on the surface seemingly very superficial and silly, and you wouldn't give her much attention probably, but ultimately very capable of taking care of herself and fighting monsters and all of that good stuff. And so if nothing else, I at least appreciate this movie for inspiring that character, because love that movie, love even more the series that came after it. It's got a little bit of that feel. Not entirely. Like, if you're a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan like I am, it's not like you're going to watch this movie and feel like it's a long-lost episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer or anything, but you at least get a similar feel, and I appreciated that. I don't even know where to begin with the plot, because seriously, it's just these two girls going about their business, and Reggie works at the local movie theater. She's an usher, and Sam is a cheerleader, and they've got this evil stepmom, I guess, whose name is Doris. they only refer to her as Doris, and I just think Doris is a funny name. And the mom is played by Sharon Farrell, who I always remember most from Can't Buy Me Love, but she was also the mom in It Lives, which we've talked about. The setup is that everybody's waiting for this comet, and Reggie's at work, and Sam is at home, and Doris is, being a bitch, and Sam, like, trying to boss Sam around. And
I want you home in 5 minutes after you finish work. If you want to watch the comet, you can do it here.
Look, Doris, like, I'm 18, okay? And I can watch the comet wherever I want to watch the comet.
And it's that type of dialogue.
Yeah. Which
just kills me.
And honestly, this dialogue is even funnier because of the discord of the actresses. They're supposed to be 18. It took about half of the movie for me to get in my mind that they were 18, because they do not look 18 at all.
No. I don't know. Maybe Sam. Sam looks like she could be young, but
maybe
they're probably 20-somethings.
It's just sillier coming out of these mouths of these women who seem so much older, to me anyway, than 18.
Well, and the whole beginning, like, really, I'm looking at my notes and it's so silly. Like, Doris is throwing a party, a comet party or whatever, and I guess that she's flirting with one of the neighbors, Chuck, and Sam says to her,
You were born with an asshole, Doris. You don't need Chuck.
and then Doris punches her. like it's so silly and so funny.
The whole movie's kind of like that too. Lines that are funny, but they're kind of corny too.
Oh, they're totally corny, and like, they're totally scripted. I have to give these actresses credit, because they deliver the lines so naturally. Like, the lines themselves are so silly, but these girls just go for it. Like, yeah, this is how we talk. What? And so Reggie and her boyfriend, the projectionist, Larry, get it on in the projection room. And then there's the comet. The comet comes, and there's all these flashing lights and weird stuff going on. And then all of a sudden it's morning and there's sunrise, and we see these shots of Los Angeles, and it's just like complete desolation. There's no cars on the road, there's nobody out around. And then when we see closer shots on like the streets, like on the streets where Doris was throwing her party, there's just these clothes strewn about everywhere. Apparently everybody just what's the word? I don't know. Like, incinerated, disintegrated.
Yeah,
yeah. Everybody turned into dust.
Yeah, it's vague, and I was looking for: is there some symbolism here? How does this work? And then it just gets more confusing when you realize that the people who are living and are left, there's still some threat of some of them turning into these zombies. I don't know. You can't really unpack it. I think it's just you got to take it for what it is.
Well, they give a stupid explanation that if you happened to be in a steel enclosure when all of this happened, then you were okay. Reggie and her boyfriend were in the projection room, which has steel walls. Sam because of her fight with Doris, went and slept in the tool shed, which apparently has steel walls. So Reg and Larry wake up in the morning and I couldn't help but write these lines down because they were so funny. Reggie says to Larry,
Oh, geez, don't I get an Egg McMuffin or anything?
oh God, it's so great. But Larry, I guess, had lent out a projection reel to somebody overnight, and they were supposed to bring it back, and they haven't brought it back yet, and so he's all freaked out, and so he goes out to check and see if this guy is out there, and this homeless zombie attacks him with a wrench.
Right as he opens a door. The whole sequence reminded me of the first kill in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay.
Where he opens the door. I don't know, man. Where he opens the door, he's going through this really quiet house, and he opens the door, and suddenly, without any warning, there's a zombie on the other side who whacks him with a wrench, and he's completely dead. Then the next shot is a wider shot, and the zombie pulls him through the door and closes it. It just seemed completely evocative of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay.
But, all right. Just an observation. Take it or leave it.
No, that's good. That's a good connection. You've seen lots of horror movies.
Right. Thanks, Craig, for not patronizing me. Oh, wait.
That was the teacher in me coming out. Good. That's good. I would have never thought of that, but good.
The movie is stylishly shot, and that's kind of one of the big things it has going for it. It's rather silly, and it's fun and funny, but in a corny way. But the fact that it's shot so stylishly, it gives a little edge over its budget. The movie had only a $700,000 budget, and by God, it shows. Some of the scenery and the lighting and all this stuff, they're really trying to make the most of very little. But the fact that it is really there's some really interesting camera angles, there's some really interesting nods to other films in there. I thought it showed that the director really, really put a lot of craft and art in it, and it made it more interesting to watch.
Well, and that was one of the things that I was struck by. I mean, this is filmed in Los Angeles, and they had to, in the days before CGI, find ways to make Los Angeles look completely uninhabited. And there are all of these shots, and they're actually kind of really striking because when you think of Los Angeles, you think of it as being just, a madhouse.
One giant traffic jam, yeah.
Right. And there are all these shots of the streets of Los Angeles just completely barren. And they pulled all of that off practically. They shot in the very early morning hours when traffic was lower, and they just did really quick shoots, like when the traffic lights would have traffic held off of certain blocks of Los Angeles, so it would look like it was completely desolate. I guess that, it was really a challenge, and they ended up, I know that they did some shooting in the very early morning of Christmas Day because the streets were pretty bare that day.
It's creative.
Yeah, and they had to think of, these days, if there's a window washer in the background of your desolate shot, you just erase them with CGI. Well, they couldn't do that, and so I guess maybe there's one or two shots I certainly didn't notice, but there are one or two shots when I guess if you look closely there are window washers in the background or something.
Oh, interesting, because I was looking.
Well, yeah, for the most part, it looks very real, and it's kind of surprising that they were able to do that.
And in another case of where these limitations really force you to get creative, I think what he does with all of these outdoor shots and desolate shots is they all have this really reddish, orangish cast to them. It's like a filter. It's a gradiated filter that you'd put over the camera so that the top, looks really, really red, and it kind of fades down to orange. But I am positive that the reason he did that was also just to keep color consistency across it. So no matter whether he shot in the morning or the afternoon or in the evening on whatever days and whatever weather, he could make all of those shots kind of appear that they were done on a single day. But it also happens to lend this real cool stylized effect to it where every time we're outside, we get this reddish cast. And then whenever we're inside, it tends to be blues and greens, excessively, quite honestly, like almost like a dream, really. It's stylish, but also almost to the point of ridiculousness when it gets inside, because there's smoke where there shouldn't be smoke. And
Sure.
like the radio station they end up going to after they retreat to a radio station, right? After this whole thing happens.
Yeah, because the radio is still going, so they think there must be somebody there.
So they go to this radio station. It turns out that it's just on, auto play. But this radio station, now I was in radio for a brief while, and I love how they portray radio stations on TV. They make them look like a music lover's paradise. They're these huge open studios with all this great decoration. This one, it makes it look like a dance club. It's like dim lighting. There's like neon flashing everywhere in there. I had to like rewind to remind myself, where the hell are they? Because I thought they were in a radio station. This is so ridiculously not a radio station. At times it looks like it's a health club because it has like a room that's like a gym in there. Like, what?
Yeah.
How could this possibly be a radio station? But it lends a very 80s stylized feel to it.
It is funny. They go to that radio station and like there's nobody there, but Sam eventually gets on the radio and while they're there, another guy shows up, Hector, hot Latin guy. like that's his role.
That's
like good looking Latino guy that
last man on earth.
right, that they can kind of squabble over, and he's clearly more interested in Regina, which makes Sam
supremely jealous.
Right. But they meet up there, and Sam goes on the radio for a second, and she's like, call the hit line if you are around or whatever. Like she sees the phone for the call-in line or whatever, so she gives out the number. And then she gets this weird call, but it gets cut off. And she says, I couldn't really understand what they were saying, but it sounds like they were like part of a think tank or some sort of experiment in the desert or something. And then that introduces a component of the movie, which frankly I could have just done without. I mean, when it boils down to it, it's kind of necessary, I suppose.
Well, it is, because without it, there is no story.
Right. It's true. There's not.
This think tank provides the only antagonist, the only conflict that just happens to them. Yeah, while they're out hanging out. That's the only thing to resolve in this plot.
And it's not necessarily that it's a bad plot element. I just feel like it's executed poorly.
Oh,
like
terribly.
There's this group of scientists who apparently knew the comet was coming, so they, I guess, holed themselves up somewhere, and they were going to be the last people, and like they didn't expect there to be survivors, and so now they're trying to figure out what to do with the survivors. And it's also contrived. Like, you learn all of this over the course of the last, 45 minutes of the movie or whatever, but they didn't expect there to be survivors, but now that there are, they don't know what to do with them. And like, there's a lady scientist. There's one main lady scientist who seems really mean, and like she's the mean lady scientist who doesn't care about the survivors or whatever. But she says at one point, we forgot to close the vents, and so we're all infected. Like they knew this comet was coming, and they knew what it was going to do, and they knew it was going to happen, but they forgot to close the vents. So now, like, they're all infected or something. Meanwhile, Sam, who slept in a garden shed, is fine.
That's right. And these scientists, keep in mind, are like deep down inside a mountain fortress in the rock, it's this crazy, ridiculous, isolated underground compound, which you have no idea what it's for during non-comet hours, right? Like, what were they doing before the comet came? What was their purpose? It's thinking, I guess. It's really hard to say. They're just, let's just say, nondescript, super secret scientists who were working on something, but then this comet thing came, and they somehow knew that this comet would be bad, unlike the rest of the world, and instead of trying to do anything about it or warning anybody about it, they hold themselves up inside. Now, when you said that they forgot to close the vents, I misinterpreted this or reinterpreted it, because she says that they left the vents open a little bit, I think is what she said, because they hoped they could develop a serum. And so my take on this was that the scientists purposely infected themselves a little bit so that they could develop a serum. Like they could make themselves like kind of like vaccinated, like expose themselves just a little bit, but not enough, so it would inoculate them a little bit. Am I misinterpreting this entirely? Because that's how I heard it. But of course it wasn't working out great for them. It just meant that they were going to zombification just a little slower than everybody else.
Yeah, I don't know, but if that was their plan, that was really stupid.
All of it's stupid. Either way you go, it's stupid. But they're like super serious, these guys, like to the point of ridiculousness. It's total B-movie schlock.
It is. It's very B-movie, like the evil scientists, and like, seriously, they are just there to provide some sort of
conflict,
right? And they're totally unimportant. And I'm bored with them, and I would totally just watch these girls see what they do.
That's true.
And
did they listen in? Like, there's this odd thing where she hangs up the phone, or they hang up the phone, and so she's not on the phone anymore. But then the camera zooms in on one of the mics in the radio room, and it's like back at the super scientist's secret laboratory. They can hear their conversation carry on. Like,
I don't know.
There was some, like, did they tap into the mic that was off in this radio station to get this information? It was so bizarre.
There's no reason for us to bring those people or any other survivors back here.
What about the disintegration factor? You just want to let that happen?
We don't know that the condition is progressive.
I think we've established that, Audrey. Partial protection seems to result in a slowing of the overall effect, but progression is steady in any case. Drying of the body fluids.
Oh, get to the point, Oscar.
Transition
We've heard this
stage.
1,000 times.
Ultimately.
What about the dust?
Ultimately, there is nothing left but calcium dust.
Right. So there isn't even enough hope to warrant bringing anybody back here.
But anyway, these guys are going to go out and get these girls because, if there are survivors, you find out that they're going to collect them and try to determine if they've been infected or not. And I guess if they haven't been infected, then their blood can be used to create some kind of serum to keep everybody else inoculated or alive.
Yeah, I guess. And that comes later. There are things that come before this that I want to talk about because they're my favorite parts of the movie. But yeah, like they're collecting these people and like it's so when we actually get to that part, it's just ridiculous because they're so callous, like they just don't care. Like they have these people that I guess they think are not infected so they can use their blood as like an antidote or something. And so they're just like, they kill them, I guess, because they say that they're brain dead. Like one of the ladies is like, "Oh, I feel bad taking his blood." And she's like, "Oh, well, we already disabled his brain, so he's brain dead anyway, so what difference does it make?" and then they've got these two little kids there.
Why don't we prep the children? When we're finished with them, we can start on that girl. They're so cute. I love working with kids.
Like, let's kill them and drain their blood. It's it's so goofy. But before we get to because the whole last act of the movie deals with the scientist, but that's boring. What comes before that is so much more fun. Sam has a nightmare about zombie cops chasing her, and like Hector, he knows that his family is probably dead, but he needs to go and make sure, and he does, and they are, and he encounters other zombies or whatever. But when Sam has this bad dream and she wakes up and she's all upset, and Regina's like, "I know what will make you feel better." So they go to the mall. And then there is a shopping fashion montage to Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
Oh, it's delightful.
I could have just watched that all day. Like, if that had been the whole movie.
That is the 80s encapsulated into one sequence right there.
Oh my God, it's so funny. They're just going around the mall, they're trying on clothes, and somehow I feel like they loosely explained it. Like their dad was in the military or something, so they know where the the reserve is or something. You don't actually see them getting the weapons, but somehow they get like
Uzis.
These machine guns, and they're like target practicing with the machine guns, and then they're trying on clothes, and like they just casually set their machine guns down while they're trying on clothes and stuff.
The casual nature of these girls' familiarity with weapons and ability to use them is part of what makes this so hilarious. I mean,
it is hilarious.
You can look at it as intentional, again, parody, they're really trying to be funny, or you can look at it as absolute schlock, and I think it's both. I'm really not willing to say what one or the other, but it does make it fun to watch. And it,
oh my God,
for what it's worth, you've got some very empowered women here leading this story, which I think is what makes it so interesting. Like you said, like Buffy, even though they're Valley Girl and they're absolutely not at all, they seem so clueless as to not at all be concerned about anything they should be concerned about, or be emotional about any bit of the people they've lost. Although there is one little sequence where they talk a bit about the boy that they liked at school or whatever that I think Sam does. Aside from that, they're not acting at all like you would imagine people would act during this time. Still, when it comes to protecting and defending themselves, they can do it.
Yeah, and it's adorable. And I totally see, I can't say the Buffy influence because obviously this came before, but I can see how this influenced Buffy because eventually, they're at the mall, they're trying on clothes, they're having a great time, it's super fun. But then it turns out that some sort of gang of thugs has like taken over the store.
The stock boys. The stock boys at the mall. They must have been in, funny. I don't know, was the warehouse, the stock warehouse also steel?
I don't know, I guess so. I also read there was like, 20th, 30th or something anniversary Blu-ray release of this, and the main actresses got interviewed. They did a commentary, which I would die to hear. I would love to hear that on the Blu-ray. But they talked about how they had so much fun in this mall scene. Like it was the middle of the night, like it was an actual mall that the producers rented out for the night or whatever, and they literally just got to run around and do whatever they want, and they got to try on all these clothes, and they had an absolute blast. And they said that the production crew had such a great time too because they could just break any, like they could break anything they wanted, and they were just like throwing stuff down, and like they just had a great time. But eventually, these mall thugs show up, and there's there's a little bit of back and forth. Like, the girls left one of their guns somewhere where the mall thugs got it, but they still have one of them, and there's kind of this shootout between. And the girls are kind of separated, and Reggie is the badass one with the gun, and she's, totally taking people out left and right, and like doing funny things like pretending to be a mannequin so they don't notice that she's there, and then she turns around with her machine gun. And
it's total 80s schlock because these thugs have all, it's indoors, it's dark, and they're all wearing sunglasses and shades. Like half of them are like shirtless, and like it is so 80s.
It is. It's hilarious. The whole scene reminded me of the scene from Mannequin where they run around and...
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a good movie. I used to watch it.
We'll never do it on this podcast, but folks, I recommend it if you're looking for 80s, Mannequin. But anyway, but the reason that it reminded me so much of Buffy is because Sam, the one without the gun, is running around kind of doing like tricky things, like tricking them into being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And when she ends up being confronted by them, she always has some really quirky quip to say to them.
How'd you like that? You can't hit anything!
That's right. Like they have no care in the world.
Oh, God, it's so funny. Well, they end up killing all those guys. Then the scientists show up, and I feel like, I said they kill all of them. That's a lie. They actually end up getting captured, and they're chained together.
Oh, yeah.
And the crazy thug guy is like threatening to shoot them both at the same time, but then the scientists show up.
This is the part I don't understand. When he notices the girls in the mall on the security cameras, he says, "It's time, boys." And they all go out and try to kill these ladies. And I'm thinking, why? What is his end game here? Like, why are these guys trying to kill these women who came into the mall? I mean, you would think that there'd be a purpose that they would serve.
Right.
But they don't end up killing them once they've got them. Instead, he seats them down, chained up. It's so dramatic. They're like chained back to back in the stock room. And he explains to them, we're the stock boys and we own this mall and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And she's like, well, what do you want? What do you want from us? Like, do you want us to pay everything back? And I'm sitting here going, yeah, like, what do you guys want with them? Like, I am dying to see what you want with them. And he says to them,
you wouldn't believe what we want from you. In your worst nightmare, you wouldn't believe.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm like, ooh, I'm on the edge of my seat trying to figure out what this is going to be. And then he just starts playing Russian roulette with one of them.
Yeah.
And then the scientists swoop in and shoot them at the last minute, because just before this, the scientists went to the radio station. They weren't there, and they looked at each other, and one says, let's try using some deductive reasoning. And the female scientist is like, deductive reasoning, and she runs away. And he says, where would two teenage girls who have nothing to do want to go? They look at each other knowingly. To a shopping mall, and that's what leads them to this shopping mall. Must be the only one in the city.
You saying it sounds so stupid. I mean, you saying anything sounds stupid, but you saying that sounds so stupid that, like, that's literally what they say.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
Let's go back.
Let's apply a little deductive reasoning.
Deductive reasoning?
Where would adolescents with nothing to do go?
They also refer to the mall as the shopping arcade.
Yes. Well, at one point he says,
I've never heard in my life.
In some really on-point dialogue, this movie has no subtlety. He says, well, this entire area is a capitalist, is a capitalist palace or whatever, but let's try the shopping mall first, or something like that. Like, really, I mean, I think you guys are going for social commentary here in the writing, but you're not making it subtle at all.
No, it's wrong place, wrong time. So the scientists show up, and this is the part of the movie that really bothers me, because Sam has kind of been complaining that she has a rash. And she says, I get rashes. You know, when I'm nervous in stressful situations, I get rashes, whatever. But she's been scratching at it or whatever. And she makes the mistake of saying that in front of the scientists. So the scientists take Reggie away, and what they say, well, we're going to leave Sam here so that we can wait for Hector to come back, because Hector is supposed to be coming back. Now, this just didn't make any sense to me at all. If it were an apocalyptic event and I were with one person, whether it be my sibling or my partner, whomever it was, the last thing that I would do
is separate.
Would allow somebody to separate us. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And Reggie, like, they show the helicopter flying away, and, like, Reggie's smiling and waving, like, bye, see you later. Like, no, that's so stupid. And it turns out it is stupid, because evil lady scientist is, like, talking to Sam, and she's like, oh, you have a rash? And Sam's like, oh, yeah, I get a rash sometimes. She's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to give you this injection. It'll make you feel better. Again, no. I'm just going to go ahead and pass on the injection, scary scientist lady.
I'll work this out on my own, thank you.
Yeah, I get rashes. It happens. I'm fine, thanks. But so this lady gives her an injection, and she dies.
Yes.
Like, okay, I'm making that sound really dramatic. She doesn't really die. But in the moment, and again, it's been 15 years since I've seen this, but in the moment I thought, oh my God, they just killed her,
yes.
And she's my favorite character.
I mean, when I saw this scene, I was like, oh my word. And for the first time in this movie, I had an emotional response. Like, it was pretty heartbreaking. Just the whole situation is heartbreaking.
Well, and part of the reason that I think that it was so heartbreaking is because it was not played super dramatically. Like,
No,
the lady just
very
gives
matter
the
of
lady
fact.
gives her the injection, and she just kind of keeps talking very nonchalantly the way that she always has been, and then she just goes out. And I really thought she was dead.
Yes.
I was mad. I was like,
Yeah.
you are kidding me. You're kidding me that you just killed off my favorite character.
Mm-hmm.
But again, folks, she's not really dead. She comes back.
But that pissed me off.
I know it did. It pissed me off too. And I have written in my notes later, "Sam's not dead!" Exclamation point. The lady scientist tricked the other scientist, which is, yeah. That's what it is. Because then we go back to Reg, and Reg is being questioned by another scientist, Dr. Carter, who's played by Jeffrey Lewis, who is so recognizable. And I looked at his IMDb page, and he's been in like a bazillion things, but nothing so notable that I could even mention it. But I swear to God, you'll recognize this guy if you've ever seen a movie ever.
Total character actor. Yep.
Right. And that's when we find out that they're harvesting blood from the survivors, and we also find out that the scientists are losing it, like they're deteriorating because they left the vents open or whatever. And this Dr. Carter tells Reg, "Your sister's dead." Then they're harvesting blood from people, and there are these two kids around, and the two kids really serve no purpose except for to be like to make the audience be like, they're not really going to kill the kids, are they? Like, that's the whole reason they're there.
Basically.
And so eventually Reggie, she breaks a chair or something, and she knocks out a scientist, and she's running around the facility, and everybody's looking for her. And Hector... so Hector had gone back to the radio station where the lady scientist who, quote-unquote, killed Sam is, waiting for him, and she kind of gives him the lowdown on what's going on, and then she injects herself with something, presumably killing herself.
Yeah.
But apparently she gave him enough information that he can go find this hidden facility, and he shows up there, and he starts like setting bombs and stuff. But when he shows up at the guard gate, and he's like, "Hey, partner!" Like he plays like this cowboy. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
He's talking to the guard at the gate. He's like, "Hey, you like girls? Let me show you something." And he opens up the trunk, and dead Sam is in there, and the guard's like, "She's dead," and he's like, "No, she's not." And then she pops up, and I'm like, "Yes, she's not dead. Thank God." I was super glad.
I felt cheated. I felt cheated of the emotional... Yeah, I felt cheated of the emotional moment that was created earlier of Sam dying. I mean, if you had left that in the film, that would have cast a real shadow over the rest of it, and I think given it some serious weight instead of make it this fluffy, goofy B movie that it ends up being. Not that it needed a lot more than that, but I'm just saying I would thought that was a really powerful scene, and then to have her spring up later, "Nope, I'm not dead after all," it's just kind of, oh, please. You know?
I get what you're saying, because that scene where I thought she was dead really was a gut punch for me.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying, but I want this movie to be cheesy and funny.
I got
right.
you.
I want it to be light. And so I was glad when she came back. And I think that had she stayed dead, it would have, not that it would have ruined the movie for me or anything, but it really made me sad, Todd.
Poor Craig. I'm so sorry.
and I didn't want her to be dead, so I was glad when she wasn't. I was glad when she came back.
We review all these films where people are just like torn limb from limb and shit like this, and you really, really want this girl to survive, or else you're going to hate this film. Oh,
that's right.
We've come to the core of your being right here.
All right. And so then we're in the scientist place, and like we've got this goofy scene with these two like heartless nurses who have already killed one guy, and now they're going to kill these kids. They really like working with kids, but they don't have any problem killing them. And like they're getting ready to inject them with this stuff that's going to make them brain dead, apparently. And the kids are like, "Wait, I thought you weren't going to give us a shot." And they're like, "Oh, well, it's just a quick shot, and then once you get it, you'll get sleepy and you'll go to sleep. And when you wake up, you'll be at the North Pole with Santa, and you'll be with Santa forever."
Where did they pull that from?
I forgot to say, I can't believe that I forgot to say, this is a Christmas movie, friends. What? It takes place right on Christmas. There's Christmas music throughout.
Yeah, it'll pass right by you.
It's not really a Christmas movie, but it's set at Christmas.
The silliest thing about this scene, now, aside from this whole notion that they're telling them that Santa is, these kids look like they're 12 and 13, but they're being played as though they were 5 and 6 years old. The girl's running around with the teddy bear, and they're talking like, "What's this? Oh, blah, blah, blah."
Yeah, they're totally obnoxious movie kids.
Oh, my gosh.
When the nurse is like, "You'll go with Santa," and the boy's like, "There's no such thing as Santa," and then the scary, ominous scientist is standing in the door, and he says, "What? You don't believe in Santa?"
That's gonna help.
Oh, God. It's really funny.
It is.
My other favorite line there is when they're trying to give the kids gas. And, like, I feel like you don't even see the kids when this, like, somebody's coming through a door. So this is just kind of in the background. But the little girl says,
"I don't know. My parents told me never to breathe anything from strangers."
Oh, man.
Oh, somebody had to have written that line on the set and said, "Just say it, say it."
We probably won't include it. Nobody's stupid enough to include it, but please say it.
Oh, God, it was so funny. Okay, and so everybody gets back together. Reg and Sam reunite, and they take the kids, and they go out, and they find Hector, and Hector's got the getaway car, and, like, they start to drive away, and then he stops, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Hold on a second, I want to see something." And all the scientists get in a van, and, like, he's obviously placed a bomb there, so when they start it explodes. But then a zombie scientist attacks the car, and then Hector shoots the zombie, and then apparently they're fine, and we cut... And then we cut to what I guess is the next day or soon thereafter, and it's raining, and the rain washes away all of the scary red dust from the dead people, and it also washes away the filter from the camera because the sky's not red anymore. Yeah. And then we see Reggie and Hector and the kids, and they're a nice little family, and they're dressed in very 80s fashion-y clothes.
Oh, and this was so cute because now suddenly Valley Girl teenager who hates her mom and everybody's so lame turns into the doting, stereotypical, goofy mom and is setting the kids up for a picture that she's taking.
Yeah, it's cute.
Yeah.
I guess Sam is on the other side of the street, and so the kids are wanting to run over to them, and Regina's like, "No, you can't cross against the light." And they're like, "What are you talking about? The world
There's no
is
traffic."
No. And she says, "The whole burden of civilization has fallen on us. We have to teach these kids the right way to do things." And Sam's like, "Oh, that's stupid. There's no traffic. I can just dance in the middle of the street." So she does. And then this sports car comes racing around the corner and almost hits her. And there's this cute teenage guy about her age in the driver's seat, and he's like, "What are you doing? You can't just... Why did you cross against the light?" And so now she's, Hector and Reg are this cute little family with their 2.5 kids or whatever, and now apparently Sam's got a little cute boyfriend, and they ride off into the sunset, and then Reg and Hector and the kids play football in the street, and it's so cute. And then a cute 80s love power ballad comes on, and the end.
That's it. It's so charming in its pure 80s-ness. I have a feeling that if our listeners who are younger than us, who maybe don't have the level of nostalgia that you and I have for this time period, are probably not going to have wrung as much enjoyment from this movie as we have.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, I think that this movie, when it came out, it
did well.
It didn't make much. Did it do well?
It made $14 million from a $700,000 budget.
Wow, that's really good.
It almost instantly became a cult classic. Now, I mean, it wasn't a mainstream hit, let's put it that way, but yeah, cult classic.
Well, and there are lots of fans of it now. I think that it was funny that the working title of the movie was Teenage Mutant Horror Comet Zombies.
I think it would have been even more successful if it had been.
I don't know. That's kind of a stretch, but I do think, for me, a child of the 80s, the nostalgia of it, that's what endears it to me. It's a cute movie. It's cute. It's funny, and the lead actresses are super
adorable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're adorable, and you really, really like them. That maybe is cross-generational, but for me, it's the nostalgia of the 80s. And it's funny because we keep talking about 80s fashion. Yeah, it's 80s fashion, but in the way that 80s fashion was portrayed in the movies.
Yes, over the top.
People didn't really...
Yes.
Most people didn't really wear those things.
Those were the things that movie stars and people in movies wore. Yep.
Right. But it's definitely identifiable as totally 80s, and I just have such nostalgia for that time period. I don't know, watching it again for the second time, there were times when I'm like, dude, why did you pick this?
To yourself.
To myself. And then there were times when I'm like, oh yeah, now I remember. Yeah. It's fun. It's fun. It's not high standards as far as cinematography and filmmaking go, but it's not poorly made. It's well made, and it's just a cute, and it's funny. It's quirky. It's not scary. It's not scary.
No.
But it's cute and quirky and funny, and I like it.
It's cheap. It's the USA Up All Night film. I bet they ran this,
but a good one.
Times. Yeah,
that's what I kept thinking. It's like those movies, but better done than most of them.
Less boring for most of it. Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed it for many of the same reasons you did, but as I said, I had to watch it a second time before I could truly appreciate it. But I was motivated to watch it a second time, so I think that says something.
Good. Well, I'm glad you liked it.
Thank you again, Craig, for not being patronizing.
That's what I'm here for. All right. Well, thanks, folks, for listening to another edition of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. Oh, man. You'd think we do this all for you, but we don't. We just do it to get together. To get together and laugh and hang out together. But we hope you enjoy listening to it. And if you do, you can find us all over the place. You can find us on Facebook, on Stitcher, on iTunes, on Google Play. We're all over the place. Any place that you can find your favorite podcasts, you'll be able to find us. We'd love to hear what you think of this movie or what you think of our thoughts on the movie. So please feel free to drop by our Facebook page and leave us a comment. We love interacting with you. Until next time, I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.